Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Red Groove Revolution podcast. I am your host, Earl Holder, aka DJ Solero, and I'm here with my special guest, arranger, co-arranger, and co-producer of the often sampled psychedelic funk rock group Giant, Mr. Alan Del Monte. Mr. Del Monte, thank you so much for availing time out of your very busy schedule to come on the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. So basically, for starters, what are some of your humble beginnings as a musician?
um, by accident, I was in kindergarten, and it was the first morning. Back in those days, there was morning and afternoon sessions, and because I was in the morning, there was a big gathering of all the students in the big meeting room, and we weren't really supposed to go. And so they brought the kindergarten group in, and because we were so young and so small, we sat in the front. And I never thought about music. I never thought about anything. And they had all these music teachers from in the Bridgeport, Connecticut system, and they were trying to encourage us, people to become musicians and take lessons and all that stuff. And here I was, 4.5 years old. I look up and I see this guy playing trumpet. And I'm just like mesmerized. So I go home and I tell my dad, and I find out that my dad had always wanted to be a trumpet player, but he was the baby of 8, Italian family, and the closest he ever got was a mandolin. So he was thrilled. They went right out and got me lessons. And at 4.5 years old, I was playing the trumpet. It's just amazing. And then through the school system, I went through the whole school system. I was all state Connecticut, trumpet player, orchestra. And then by the time I was halfway through my high school career, I started studying I studied with Meryl Debsky, who was Leopold Stokowski's personal soloist, and all these big time, teachers. And I don't know how my parents ever afforded giving me all those lessons, but and then when I got to New York City and I got to be a club musician and a studio musician, I studied with the legendary Carmine Carosa, just on and on and on. And there's so many things I could say, but I was very fortunate while I was in college to meet this young firebrand, David Spinoza, who has become a legendary studio guitar player. And we became really good friends, and we collaborated on this. David played a lot of sessions. He was the reason why I even went to New York, because he had started to get really, really, popular. And he kept calling me up and asking me to come to New York. And finally I came, and we collaborated on a bunch of things. And Giant was like his brain trust of all the stuff that he had been hearing in the studios and stuff. And we were like blood brothers. Like, we would just sit and talk for hours, and this whole idea of doing Giant came up, and we just worked and worked and worked. And I was so fortunate to be able to just be there with him and work with him, and we put together this thing, and it was just fabulous. And unfortunately, the A&R director who came at Mercury at the time was a fellow who just couldn't understand where this album was coming from, and it never got out there. But somehow or other, people through the years have gotten their hands on this album, and it is amazing the effect it's had on people. I read some of the stuff from time to time, and it's like, gee whiz, it's like. For us, it was such a wonderful thing to do. I mean, it was really something that we collaborated on, and we breathed it for a couple of months of recording it. And most of the young musicians, and there were guys that David grew up with. And so these were just not professional musicians. These were guys that played and David knew and went through high school with. And then, then you see on the album, there are other guys like, some of the great studio guys, and it just was amazing. This whole thing came together, and Irving Spice was the violin contractor for New York City. Ex concert guy, and we just got involved with so many great people to put this thing together, and so many people loved it. And this A&R guy just decided, no, no, and that was it. It died. But Robert Moore Moorless, who went on to be a legendary person in music, he loved it, and he wrote the liner notes. And now you're telling me that hip hop comes along, and it's like, holy cow, I'm blown away by this. My grandson even knew about it and I didn't. So,
Well, that's what I was going to ask you also. Like just to backtrack a bit, how did Giant as a collective, as a group, initially get together? You had mentioned because of you and Mr. Spinoza.
yeah, David went to high school with all these young guys, and he put a band, and I actually went to Florida with them uh, right while I was just left college and was starting a teaching career. And so I just decided I was going to go with them. And I met all these young guys, and they were a great bunch of smart young kids. Tommy Arlotta, one of the writers, is really, really a different kind of thinking, really, really interesting young man who could work really magic with putting words together, and then a couple of years later, while we're working, I don't know how he did it, but he got these guys together again, and he decided, that we were going to do this Giant thing. And, you couldn't get all these studio musicians together because that would have been a fortune. And it was kind of like, writing, playing the songs, making them better, dealing with them, whatever. And then finally, after a couple of months, getting into the studio, getting guys like some of these other guys to come in and play along with us. But that band actually we did a Three Dog Night concert where we actually played, and we got a chance to do that. And then all of a sudden we were stuck. We were closed down. That was the end of it. It was really crushing to both of us. And it was a very disheartening experience, because we felt we came up with so many great new ideas. We didn't want to be Chicago. We didn't want to be Blood, Sweat, and Tears. We didn't want to be Tower of Power. And David was working all these sessions and hearing all this stuff going on. And so just finding ways of using different things that we knew and we had heard from different people, we took our combined mentality of the way we saw music, and somehow or other came out this thing, and we were so proud of it, and we were so happy about it. And then all of a sudden, Irving, who was very, very important at the time, Irving Spice, told us what was going to happen, and we were just crushed. We couldn't believe it, and I thought personally that was the end, and then after that, I got through David. I met somebody who introduced me to a Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, Jeff Berry, who wrote like 80 hit records. And so I went to work with Jeff Berry in his studio. First of all, I had this love for engineering, and I decided I'd try it. But then I started playing also for Jeff. It was just, it was a wonderful time, but New York City was alive. It was incredible. I mean, the Stones would be in the city, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix. I mean, you name it. Anybody was in New York, sitting in clubs on 8th Avenue. It was the most magical time for music. I met just through Mills Music, a lady there who was worked in the office, and she told me she was going to go back to Philadelphia and get involved with her old man in writing. And I'm saying, okay, and I didn't make much of it. And David and I are sitting in a Hornet. We're sitting in a truck full of nuts, and we hear on the radio, this song by Tommy Bell and Linda Creed. They were going, Linda Creed. Oh my God. that's, and these are the people that we were involved with all the time. And that's how, you know, take David taking this group of young guys who were willing to come and learn this music. We would go down to Mamaroneck where all these guys lived. It wasn't, we would do these rehearsals. We would take the train to Mamaroneck. We would do the rehearsals. We would try stuff, do different stuff, come back to the city. He'd come to my apartment. We would make changes. We would do this. We would do that, go back down there. Finally, when we were ready, we brought it to the city and we recorded. And I think it took at least 4 or 5 sessions to get all 12 songs done. And this what the heck was it? Christy Thompson was this girl from California that just happened to be, somehow or other we got to know her. And she was this girl in New York City, a young lady, and she had a Hammond B3 organ with the big box, speaker thing. And so we started talking to her, and we loved her voice, and we added the organ to the group. I mean, it was just magical. It was like a magical year that all of a sudden was just squashed.
So this was all the recording process of your 1970 LP, What's in This Life for You, what you just described.
That's
Wow.
it. That's
Wow.
it.
Wow. So if the album was the album released by Mercury Records, how did that come about? Because I've heard through the grapevine that they were like it never was released like officially, but then it
Irving,
was released officially. I'm like I get conflicting stories.
no, Irving Spice is long gone, and Max Ellen, and this is how you would meet people in the city. I mean, how it was in the city. Irving Spice was this giant violin guy who, anytime you wanted anybody, you would call Irving Spice. And as big as the industry was in New York, chances are Irving was the guy you'd call for string players. And then he had this protege, Max Ellen, who was younger than him. And actually, Max Ellen was a survivor of concentration camps in Germany. And he played in the Philharmonic. And so you had these two guys from the Philharmonic. They were with Mercury. And then David somehow or other met them, maybe on a session, whatever. And they took a liking to him, which was impossible not to take a liking to him. And David sold this idea to them, and they sold the idea to Mercury. But what happened is that Mercury, all of a sudden, when we were done, Mercury changed A&R people. And all of a sudden, this Steve, whatever his name was, came on, and he wanted to keep all the old Mercury recording artists, and he didn't want to do anything new. So he's the one that killed it. It would have never happened had he come earlier, because Mercury paid for the whole album to be done. So for all these sessions and all these giant guys to come in and just throw little, on a song, maybe we'd use a couple different trombone players, or a couple different this, or a couple different that, but basically 98% of this was done by David, myself, and these young guys. And we changed drummers somewhere in between, and but I mean, some of these guys went on to be studio players. Unfortunately, I can't think of the drummer who was very close. These guys all grew up together, somehow or other, and they played around clubs, and I had heard about them, and I heard about this guitar player kid. And it was David Spinoza. David's become a legend in recording. He's played with everybody. He's been on numerous hit records and stuff, But when I went with Jeff Berry, and then I did a couple other things, and I got really disenchanted with music, and I left music completely. And then 30 years later, I picked up my horn because I'm a Christian now, and I play in church, and I love it, But I had big band experience being a child. I had jazz. I had playing in a wedding band. I started at 11 and a half years old playing weddings with a accordion band, playing. Policeman knew my father, heard me playing. asked my father if I could play, you know, in his band, you know, but my dad knew him. And at 11 and a half years old, I'm playing weddings and bars and all this stuff. And then, you know, now I'm in college and I hear about this young kid and I go to see him and it's David Spinoza. And I go like, wow, this kid is amazing, you know, and we became such good friends. It was about a 10-year amazing friendship. I mean, and had he not dragged me to New York, it wouldn't have happened. You know, it wouldn't have happened. You know, it just was one of those things. It was a labor of love. Just know that whatever people are getting from Giant, it was two guys just getting together and doing something that meant so much to us at the time. We took the two of our, you know, thought processes and put it together for David's thing. It was just one of those things.
Now, describe to me, this is the question that everybody wants to know. Describe to me the recording process of the song that everyone has associated the group Giant with, that hip hop producers and MCs alike have sampled at some point in time throughout hip hop history, the Queen of Downs. What was the recording process making Giants the Queen of Downs?
Well, the trumpet solo in the beginning and throughout is something that I was lucky enough to do. And David wanted that. He said, oh, we should start it with this. And I'm thinking, and then it was like throwing the kitchen, everything you know, into a song. We tried to take that song and do amazing things all the way through the song. There's so many different things that you just don't normally hear in, you know, you didn't hear from Chicago, Blood, Sweat and Tears, any of those groups that we all loved. But we tried to do something that what we thought was every really good idea that we could think of, to put it here, to put it there, to put it there, to make it make sense and add to what we were doing. Again, I would think most of the words came from Tommy Yarlata because that was his frame of mind. I mean, he would come off the wall with these words, and David must just fell in love with this thing and helped them with the music, and then he helped write the music. And then we decided we're going to do this thing. It's so off the wall. It's something we've never encountered. We're going to do something completely different. And we put so much, you know, blood, sweat, and tears into that song because there's so many different, you know, the drum licks, the trumpet solo, you know, throughout it, and the way we come out of some of the things, and the bong, bing, bong, bing. That was something that, you know, David came up with out of, you know, where was that, you know, and on and on and on. I mean, that song was like a potpourri of, you know, every idea we could come up with. And it was wonderful. And I am so fortunate. I still brag about it. I said, you know, I talk about my friend David that I haven't seen in 40 years, but I follow his career. He's played with everybody. He's played with McCartney. He's played with Lennon, and he's played with I think somebody else. He played with 3 Beatles. You know, he's the guitar player on Ram, Paul McCartney's first album. I mean, you know, he developed into such an incredible person. You know, and I was so fortunate. I mean, you know, he got me this job with you know, Jeff Barry. I mean, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I met some of the biggest stars, people from the past, you know, and that's what David and I brought to this, was our experiences in life. Even though he was a young guy, he had amazing experiences, and he was around a lot of really older people, older players, and as a young person, so was I, and we were able to bring that together into that. I just remember hours and hours and hours in my apartment, just getting together with David, and we would just go over and over and over and over. one time we were in the longest train delay in the history of New York City going to Westchester County. Something happened in the tunnel, and we were stuck in the tunnel for like 3 hours. There was no cell phones. There was no, you know what I mean? We couldn't get in touch with anybody, and people went, "Where are these guys? They're supposed to be here." You know, it was a spectacular time.
How how do you feel about basically hip hop producers and MCs alike that have sampled the Queen of Downs? What's your take on that?
I'm fascinating, fascinated because the time I left music, I got more into music. I never had to know what does Chicago sound like, or what does this sound like, or what does that sound like. I just started to love listening to music. You know, I listened to the Beach Boys. I never listened to the Beach Boys. So to bring it back, rephrase the question for me again. I'm off in right field
No,
here.
it's okay, no problem. What's your take on hip hop producers
Oh, oh,
sampling the
oh.
Queen of Downs?
You know, there was a point in music where it was harder and harder and harder to get this to plagiarize. They were starting to allow things to come in, and hip hop took total advantage of that. And anytime, I mean, any music is creative. It's supposed to be creative. And so they broke the mold. That broke the mold like David and I tried to break the mold. You know what I mean? Our own little way. And to know now that what we did helped other people break the mold is exciting to me. And you know, so my grandson played a couple things for me this morning because I told him we were going to do this. And, you know, he said, "Oh, let me play this." And I said, "Holy cow, this is so cool." You know, it's like,
Yeah.
what was it? Rick Dees he took a couple things like the track ideas and put them into his songs, you know, and and I was familiar with that, but I'm now becoming a fan of hip hop because it's something I can listen to now. You know, my grandson already said, "I'm going to send you a whole bunch of stuff. I'll text it to you, songs you want to listen to." I'm ready. You know, I just, what is your involvement with hip hop? Is that, did you love it or are you involved in it?
Oh man, I've done radio, I've done television, I've done documentaries. I'm quite involved. I'm definitely I've done music. I'm quite involved. Yeah.
Can we stay in contact with each other? This is like,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
you,
Absolutely.
oh man,
I
you
was
could.
just gonna ask you also, since we're on the topic, like what was the drummer's name that played on the Queen of Downs that's been sampled?
Oh, Rick Marotta, and he actually wrote a couple jingles for TV shows, and the other one was Glenn Tappan. We found him from Long Island. He's the one that came up with that. He came up with all
So
that
there were
kind of
two.
stuff in Queen of Downs. That was Glenn Tappan, but Ricky
Oh,
Marotta turned out to be he played with oh God, you know, the group that did I can't write Reeling in the Years. That group, Rick Marotta played with them. David Spinoza played with them. You know, it was really cool. It was really cool.
okay. So there were you said there were two drummers on the Queen of Downs or just one?
Just one. That was Glenn Tappan.
Glenn Tappan?
Yeah, he was from Long Island. How
Wow.
we find that's another thing. You know,
Wow.
Rick was going to do something. He had the opportunity to do something, and it was cool. That was great. You know, so all of a sudden, so he said, "Well, if I can be there, whatever." But then all of a sudden, somehow or other, we got Glenn Tappan, and he turned out to be a totally different drummer, and he was more flash. He was like the kid with the Rascals. You know, he was more of a flashy type drummer. He played some really articulate stuff. It was really, really cool. Rick Marotta was more like a funk, um, uh, uh, even big band, like a bassy kind of the real bottom of the, real solid made the song happen. And then along comes Glenn Tappan at the perfect time when we're doing songs that are going to need this kind of, like almost off the wall drumming, and unfortunately, I lived in the city 7 years after this, and I hardly ran into any of these guys. I ran, Rick I knew well, and but I never saw Glenn again. I never saw Christy moved back to California where she came from. It was one of those things. It was, for me anyway, it was magical. It just was so improbable to take these guys from Fairfield, Westchester County, who are not studio musicians, to get them to do this, to take a guy like David Spinoza who meets a guy from, Bridgeport, and we become like brothers, and then it just was like, it was just magical. And I'm thrilled that people feel that way. I'm so excited. I can't wait. Daniel wanted me, my grandson wanted me to ask you, is there anything that you could tell us where, any songs that you or artists that you could tell us about, even if it's too long for this, what you were doing now, text me like some songs where I could hear this, because I'm dying to hear this. I can't wait to hear what we did on somebody else's work. That is like, that's magical. It's unbelievable.
Okay, I got you. I got you. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the Queen of Downs has been like sampled, and it's one of, and not only just for sampling purposes, but also for the mere fact that it's a collector's item, which also segues into my next question. Did you know that the album "What's in This Life for You" will be as well received that it's been over the years by hip hop DJs and just overall record collectors alike? Did you think it will be as well received as it is now, as opposed to when it was released back in 1970?
Let's put the word hope. I hoped, that people would see it, and but no, Earl, um, because when you do something like this, you have no idea how it's going to be received. A hint was Robert Moore Morless, because when I read the jacket note, the jacket liner, I was stunned because I knew him and I knew of his reputation, and I thought, here we go, we're on our way. This is unbelievable. And then to have it just, to stop, and now to find out that, over the years Discogs has been a real great thing, for me here, hearing stuff. But over the years, finding out people actually found the record. Like, we're not talking about, DJs and stuff, but people are in a record store and they're going through the old bins and they see this thing that looks like, the dog, and they go like, oh, and they love it. And they write, I've never heard anything but a compliment or like somebody being blown away. And you gotta know what that feels like to me. Like, I'm like, wow, really? I mean, and the beautiful things people have said about that, that record, that album, it's just amazing to me. It's very heartwarming because, when I left music, I was really jaded. There was so much nonsense going on, and that, being a trumpet player is one thing, like for rhythm section guys, keyboard player, guitar, drum, bass, these guys were really involved in the belly of all music, but the rock music. Horn players, there was only a room for a couple, luckily for me, I got with Jeff Berry. I got to be friends with Bobby Bloom of Montego Bay, and so I worked on Bobby's stuff, and that was like wonderful to me, and there's a song I did for Bobby Bloom, "We're All Going Home." If you ever listen to it, it's me recorded 7 times, 4 trumpets and 3 flugelhorns. Back then, when 8-track was just going over to 16-track, and that's how they did it. And and it was Phil Spector was with that wall of music, and Jeff Berry was kind of like a fan of Phil Spector, so he tried to put that wall of music thing with my horns, and it was pretty cool, you know.
I noticed you mentioned earlier Discogs.com. It's so funny you should mention that because that's where I get a bulk of my information about what happened, who sampled what, and that, this, that, and the third. And just not
Yeah,
only just for sampling purposes, but just mainly just for information about the artist or the groups themselves as the music was being made. So yeah, you just hit the source right there. Discogs.
yeah. Um, uh, I don't know how. I think I just discovered it maybe 8 or 9 years ago by accident, and I see my name. And what happened
Well, they
was,
do their homework.
oh, it was because of my writing. I got published by Page Publishing, uh, and I was looking for my name through book stuff, and I see my name on Discogs, and I go like, "What has this got to do with books?" You know, and I go on, and there I am. It's like this is amazing. You know, it's like
Right, 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 right.
a lot of surprises in my life. I could tell you about the 3 years I played with when I first went to the city. And if you're ever interested in this sometime, which got nothing to do with hip hop, but I was around the gangsters of New York, the ones you see um, in the movies, and the real guys that they portray. And all of us that worked the clubs, it wasn't just me. Anybody that worked the club in New York, we were owned by these guys. And if you read Tommy James, The Mob, the Music, and Me, you find out about that. I lived that life. That was my time in New York City.
Oh, I'm well
That's what,
familiar about that. Yeah, Vanilla Fudge. They were, with Carmine
yeah,
Appice. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it was. I know about that. I know a little bit about that. Anyway, in closing, what are you up to these days?
I am a writer, and I'm just about to do finally what you do. I'm going to be doing podcasts and stuff, but within in the Christian world. I'm a Christian. I'm a 35-year Christian, and now I'm going to. I'm very, very disappointed in this evangelical nonsense that's going on, and getting back into the Word of God. And I don't want to be, the fivefold ministries and all that stuff. I just want to be somebody who sits out in the congregation, listens to what I'm seeing, and tells the people, no, I don't like that. And if there are so many people now that are going on and saying it's kind of like it's frightening how many people are leaving the church. And one of the reasons they're leaving the church is false teaching. And and people have been so disappointed, um, and one last thing, I started in boys clubs. I started in music and sports. Okay. I've never understood, and I'm an Italian who came out of an Italian neighborhood, and all that was going on back in the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. I never could understand, and I'm an only child, so I didn't have to fight with my siblings. But I'm a person who never could understand, and I still can't to this day, why you would take a person that's a different color and you would think of them as something less, whatever. And when I went to the city and I was around these great black musicians and guys from the symphony and guys and smart and all this stuff I had been brought up to, listening all around me. And I'm going like, and that's why I those years were magical to me, because that's when I grew up. That's when I became a man, because I found out that the way I was thinking was the right way. And all those things that I couldn't stand, were the wrong way. And now, being a Christian, watching what's happening with the evangelical church and how that has pushed so many people away and screwed so many people and taken so much money and stuff, I want to do something about it.
Okay.
And that's it. That's what I want to do with the rest of my life.
All right. Well, with that being said, Mr. Del Monte, thank you so much for availing time out of your very busy schedule once again to come on the program. And you're welcome to come back anytime. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Really. I'll be back.
Yes, yes. You're definitely welcome. Definitely are welcome. Thank you once again, okay?
Okay, take care. Good luck.
All right, you
Bye.
too. Take it easy.
God, God bless you.
All right, thank you, bro. Talk to you later.